It's really good to be here with you today. Whether you are here live or whether you are kind of tuning in a week or so after the kind of live session, it's great to have you here with us. I'm just going to start with a quick kind of introduction so you'll see some pictures here to some of the EduSpots team. So that's me on the right hand side. I'm the Educational Partnerships Coordinator, so I'm the one that you've been emailing for the last few weeks. And then we've got Kat with us. I don't know if you can give us a wave. Is the founder and CEO of so a very important person of EduSpots. We've got Fad, and we've got Cynthia, and I think Hepsi is hiding somewhere this evening as well, which is wonderful. So let's get started with the kind of agenda, what's coming up in terms of this. So just to mention that this is a webinar style, so it basically means kind of cameras off and muted, just kind of enjoy the information, but there is an opportunity for you to ask questions as well if you just email the normal email address, which is ambassadors@eduspots.org. So if you have any questions, then please do email those in. You can do that during the session, that's absolutely fine, and we'll kind of keep tabs on those emails, or you can do it after the session, equally fine. So I'm going to introduce people really as we go through this evening's session. And then we're going to hear from Kat herself. We're going to hear about the EduSpots story first. Then we're going to learn a bit about, well, what is a spot and what kind of happens in a spot from Fad. Then we're going to move on to the volunteers, because that's really at the heart of everything we do, is that kind of community-led education that we're very, very passionate about. And then I'll just end with some key reminders really in terms of the project. So here she is, big picture as well. I would like to introduce you to Kat Davison. She's the founder, she's the CEO of EduSpots. She's currently in the UK, but she does spend quite a bit of time as well in Ghana. So we're going to begin with some quick fire questions, if that's okay, Kat.
I think after this big introduction,
so
down a peg.
I love it. What is your favorite color?
I think actually I saw this question before, and I think I found this one hard, but I'm going to go with orange.
Orange. Is there a reason for orange, Kat?
I don't know, the kind of critical thinking behind color choices just was a bit too much for me today.
Maybe it's a happy color,
right, but not too bright.
Yeah, I like it. Do you have a most hated food?
I think tomato ketchup is like one of the few things I just cannot stand the taste of. I think making me anything with tomato ketchup on would not get a good response.
That would be a nightmare. Interesting. I'm the opposite way around, so I don't like tomatoes, but I do like tomato sauce. It's a quirky thing. Who's your biggest inspiration?
So I think in a practical sense, the biggest inspiration I have for motivating me to keep going with EduSpots work at times of challenge is definitely the volunteers across the network that I'll talk a little bit more about later. And I think it's important that you get sort of daily inspiration from people around you and from people who are kind of really immersed at things at a very ground delivery level. I think we have a tendency in society to think of, the sort of big leaders or big people who've done this scaled impact and change. And I think we always need to remember that it's the individual people at the forefront of the work that are the ones that make the change, who often have to have the most amount of courage and persistence to keep doing what they're doing. But in terms, if you want a big kind of idol, I have two, if I may.
Yeah, please do.
So in case they're relevant for people joining this course who are really interested in social change, I think the founder of Teach for America, Wendy Kopp, inspires me because she had an idea of a model for it's basically a teacher training organization that started in America called Teach for America, where you take highly talented graduates and bring them into the teaching profession, giving them an experience of the teaching profession and what it's like at the kind of grassroots education level, and then kind of developing their leadership skills through this and taking that knowledge into society in different ways. And it's gone all across the world in different formats. There's Lead for Ghana, although I think that's not currently part of the Education for All network, but it's just a good example of how you can have an idea, test it, and scale it. And then the other one is Wangari Maathai, a Kenyan lady who won the Nobel Peace Prize, who set up the Green Belt movement, which is a movement that planted millions of trees across Kenya, and at the same time was about promoting women's rights in the process. So she did a huge amount of work in ensuring that women had the vote and were active political participants, whilst also getting people across the world to plant trees. And if you read her autobiography, in fact, either of their autobiographies, they're incredibly inspiring in different ways. They give the kind of hidden story of their lives, which sometimes when you see a leader on the outside, you won't ever imagine all the challenges that got them through to the level of impact they have. And they just give very open, authentic kind of backstories.
Cool. Love that. Nice and detailed as well. I think that gives us a glimpse into you as well, Kat, in terms of like you immediately went to EduSpots first, like and who inspired you there. And what are you most proud of really at EduSpots? Can you pinpoint something that you're most proud of?
I'm sorry, I know you probably wanted quick fire answers.
Oh, that's fine.
I think the thing that I'm most proud of, and I hope I speak for the team in saying I think we're all proud of, in that it's right at the heart of our model, is that, and it's something I'm also I think is important to emphasize as someone being from the UK who's doing this project that's currently more Ghana focused, is that I think in EduSpots, the model is genuinely led by the communities in different ways. And lots of organizations say that this is true. But in EduSpots, and it's something that's a current work in progress, I'm not going to at all state that we're at a point of expertise or that we're got this completely right or that we're all the way we want to be on this. But the whole way EduSpots has developed has always stemmed from the volunteers' ideas about what the change they want in their communities. So when we make a decision as an organization, generally we do high levels of volunteer consultation rather than it being something that's sort of just led out of the blue or from what we as a kind of management team think or staff team think. And it's important to say that even the staff team here tonight, Fad and Cynthia, big people to know in EduSpots, that they have both come through volunteer paths. So like 60% of our staff team come from volunteer routes. So it's important that in every meeting in EduSpots, there are staff members who've been in these rural communities acting as spot volunteers. So I think that's it, that kind of volunteer voice that's at the heart of our model, and ensuring that leads our approach is the thing that's most unique about EduSpots and is the most precious thing about our work. And it's also the most difficult at times, because taking time to ask people what they think and ensure that they have that decision-making chance takes a lot of engagement and giving them information and making sure that time is created. So it's something that doesn't just come easy. So yeah, that's been the most work and also the thing I'm most proud of.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. And we're going to learn a bit more about that volunteer model as well a bit later on from Cynthia herself. So that would be excellent. We're going to move it, like delve a little bit deeper, hopefully now, in terms of like the bigger EduSpots story. So there's kind of 3 prompt questions, I suppose, there for us. And the first one being, well, where did it all begin?
So first thing I want to say as well is I know I've kindly been put in this position where I'm telling the story, and I think it's great that we have Fad and Cynthia who will have their own sort of versions of the story. And one thing I'm always keen to say, if you go and look at our website, is that EduSpots story is not a narrative that's set around me as an individual and me going somewhere, me starting something up. The beautiful thing about EduSpots is that there are 50 communities who all have their own story of how their spot was founded, that each of those 50 spots have someone in their communities who wanted to create a particular change for their community, and that they actively sought the opportunity to set up a spot, and that those are people who on the ground level are, creating their systems to make sure there's an impact in terms of education in their communities. So I'm going to give you a brief glance into kind of my side of the story, but I think it's important to say that there are 50 stories, in fact, probably more than 50 stories. Yeah. Fad has a story, Cynthia has a story, and so forth. So the first, just to take you back, I think this was to 2012 even, for my side of the story, I was
Yeah.
involved in a partnership project that as part of its work was engaged in creating a library, and that library was in a private school. And along with Francis, who's not here tonight, who's a Ghanaian co-founder, we spent some time looking at what was going on. And this library was there were books in it, but it just wasn't opened to the kids. And it felt particularly that there wasn't strong, even kind of school ownership, let alone wider community ownership, and definitely not ownership with people sharing the books between schools. So there was all this work going on with the international partners involved, getting books to this library. But it was actually a private school. So in Ghana, just to give a bit of the context, and in lots of countries across the world, you have a lot of low-cost private schools where people pay a fee. But in Ghana, generally, there is free education. So I think this is a good example of where you might think you're doing something that's positive. And I'm not going to say that that library, when it was open for the students, didn't have some impact on them. But it had other effects in the wider community that maybe kids and parents that were engaging at other schools would look at this school and kind of think, hang on a minute, that's the school getting the support. Should we all move and jump to this private school? And I also just looked at the library and felt, the students weren't really able to use it. They weren't leading it. They weren't owning it. So you see, there were kind of basically two really simple problems here. And it's interesting that these two problems are the things that still are the main ones that we're trying to solve through our model. So the first one is about community ownership and a lack of community ownership in this sense. So you see, when we created the EduSpots model, that it's completely built on community ownership, not private school ownership, not ownership from EduSpots. We don't own any of the spots that are owned by the communities. And then the second point is around participation and shared engagement in education. So in EduSpots, all the spots are open, free access to anyone, that anyone in the community can use them, that schools collaborate, that they share, that we try to bring different students together from different schools in our programs. And also to not only just start on programs, we found that basically there were loads of people in Ghana who wanted to get behind the creation of these spots and who had all the desire and all the competencies to lead this change in their communities. So also in EduSpots, we don't always build from problems. We look at the huge capacities and strengths in communities that they lead from in their own ways, in different ways. So this led to the first spot being created in a community called Aberfour in the Ashanti region, which is a kind of farming community. And sort of from there, I guess, we did one spot and I can't even remember the whole process of how we got from there at one spot to 50 spots. But to cut a long story short, I think it's important to say that EduSpots has had this kind of sense of a bit of a movement behind it, that once we had one spot and that spot worked, then we went to 2, 3, 4, 5. At the time we had 5. We then created a WhatsApp group where we brought them all together. I think it was around 10. Everyone in the WhatsApp group was like, let's meet in real life. We had a national conference. And then it's kind of built from there. After that, we started realizing we needed to run programs so that everything was more formalized. So we launched our first program, and then the programs have got more complex, and we've built them up to include sort of further development points that the volunteers themselves wanted. So all change truly starts with a single sort of idea and a single step. And I definitely myself remember the first books collected, that all started in one suitcase. So I never dreamed at that beginning what might happen at this point. And it's been through magnificent levels of teamwork and hundreds of people being involved. That wasn't too long. That was an 8 story condensed for you.
But why EduSpots though? What's with the name?
So in Ghana, the spots that are also found in Ghana are the names for drinking spaces. So in different communities across Ghana, you find wonderfully sort of diverse, basically bars that are called things like My Best Friend's Drinking Spot, or God Save Me Drinking Spot, or End of the World Drinking Spot, that they all have their own names. And basically Francis and I were driving around, and we have this game where we spot all the spots as we drive. I don't think I've told the team this before.
Brilliant. Fad's smiling away here.
we looked at these spots and we thought, why don't we have that same idea of kind of socialization that is in the community in these drinking spaces, but bring it into education. So we're also trying to cut against the, I think, quite Western idea of a library that can exist in Ghana, where it's a very quiet space where everyone sits in silence and reads in silence. But I don't think that's a particularly culturally African concept. So we want the spots to be more about kind of active knowledge exchange, kind of lively engagement in education, play, and similar, and practical kind of practical educational experience in different ways. Although sometimes a bit of quiet can be useful. So we let that up to the communities in terms of how they're run.
Awesome. Cool. And I guess you've already touched on the kind of why Ghana issue, but is there anything else you want to add in terms of Ghana itself?
I think why Ghana? In a way, why not Ghana? There's a lot of amazing things I think about how Ghanaian communities work that means that our model works particularly well in the Ghanaian context. So they already have very strong community structures and communication systems that pre-exist EduSpots. So there are already traditional leaders, there are religious leaders, there are political leaders, there are educational leaders. So as compared to the UK, although I think the EduSpots model could work in the UK, it's very easy in a Ghanaian community to work out who you need to liaise with to make something a success at the community level. Also, I think it's important to say there are certain needs in Ghana that I think I'll let Fuad and Cynthia touch upon more. That means I think we really do make a particular impact through our model that might not be the same in another country. But I think the EduSpots model could work in contexts all across the world. And it's important to say EduSpots is not all about Ghana, although it's partly about Ghana. It's about a model for community-led change that we're basically testing and developing that we think could have wider applications once we get our own house in order in Ghana and really strengthen the work we're doing.
Brilliant. That's awesome. And just a quick reminder as well, if you have any questions, then please do obviously send them across by email, because there's lots of information I think to digest tonight as well. So feel free to do that. I'm going to put Fuad into the hot seat now. Thank you so much, Kat. So introducing the fantastic Fuad. He is our programs manager. He's kind of like the go-to guy really for all of that kind of program, all the programs that we run really in Ghana. So Fuad, welcome to the hot seat. It's great to have you with us this evening. I'm going to start again with some quick fire questions so we can kind of get to know a little bit about you before we learn a bit more about your role in terms of EduSpots. Okay, so first thing is, what's your favorite animal? I've tried to mix up the questions a little bit.
This is an interesting question. I would say my favorite animal would be a wildcat. Why? Because my name, the meaning of my name is, a wildcat.
Is it?
Exactly.
I never knew that.
That
means wildcat or leopard.
Yeah, that's very cool.
I just jump in to say, how did I never know that, Fuad? I feel like so much on the team and you're competing with the wildness as well. I'm just thought I'd come in there.
I love it. No, it's great. Yeah, feel free. Discussion space. That's awesome. And who is your biggest inspiration? There's a bit of a tie there with Kat, perhaps, in the questioning, but biggest inspiration?
Well, I think this would be a tough question for me, but I would say Helen Keller. Why? Because she, I think, was the first blind and deaf graduate. And then I draw lots of inspiration from her because in instances where I find myself, sort of like broken down, I think about her story, that she, although had, these impairments, but was able to go through her educational journey, made it to the tertiary level, and then even graduated with honors. Yeah. It tells me a lot that everything is achievable once you put your mind to it.
Yeah, it's an amazing opportunity and achievement, isn't it? I think, yeah, brilliant. I can definitely see the inspiration there. And do you have a most hated food?
Interesting. Okay, so most hated food maybe would be one of these local dishes. It's peculiar to the northern region. It's called ticket. Yes, made from corn dough with this particular soup. Yeah.
Okay.
I hate it, but don't really like.
Not too much. Not too keen. Okay, and now on to kind of EduSpot's territory here. So what do you think is the best thing about EduSpots?
Wow. So for me, the best thing about EduSpot is our community-led model, in the sense that it gives community full ownership of the project. And then because we operate in different communities across the country, we have different norms, different cultures, different traditions, and then we can't impose values in communities that, you know, we are in a way sort of new. So we allow the community who know their, you know, cultural context very well to take full leadership of the project. So that's what, you know, interests me more about EduSpots and our model.
Awesome, I like that. And that ties in so much with what Kat was saying as well about the kind of volunteers that we have and how they're kind of at the center of everything as well, right? And the community. Kat mentioned all the different leaders that we work with as well within the spots and things. So I think, yeah, that's really interesting. It is definitely the heart, isn't it, of so much in terms of what we do. So if we kind of keep with the EduSpots theme now, and we're going to focus on this idea really of like, what is a spot? Okay. So especially for our ambassadors in the UK who are perhaps new to EduSpots, maybe not quite sure what a spot actually is. So I guess, first of all, let's think more, I suppose, geographically, where might you find a spot?
Right. So as mentioned by Kat, we have 50 spots across Kenya and Ghana. And typically you'd find a spot in cut-off communities, in the sense that these communities are in rural areas. So these are areas you'd find a spot.
Okay, brilliant. So rural, cut-off, but across quite a wide region, yeah?
Exactly, exactly.
And do you think you could give us an idea of what a day might be like in a spot?
All right, so coming through the, you know, volunteer part, I think day in the life of a sport is an interesting one. So, you know, I was a contract teacher in Sakasaka for 2 years, and then let me just say, I spent my entire 2 years in the sport. So usually what happens in the sport is that once students come in, we have a log book where they sort of like, we take their details, their time they checked in and checked out. This helps us to keep, you know, a good systems, know the number of people that came into the library, maybe across first 3 months, and then know the resources that are being mostly used. Right. So there are instances where we'd also, you know, sort of like organize sessions with our learners to undertake these challenges. And as mentioned by Kat, the spots are innovative learning centers, sort of like centers where education is made more practical. We engage the kids, let them lead activities. So when these sort of like, we plan a session with the kids, volunteers in charge, say for instance, if it is EduLit, the volunteer will take full ownership or full lead on administering the challenge to the kids, take them through what the requirements are, and then for that day, we record that as, you know, an activity for the day. So these are some of the things we do in a sport. It's, you know, either the conventional, you know, come to the sport to read, or the activities we do. Also, we do hold sessions for community stakeholders, say would need to have a meeting with them. It is in the sports that we do have the meetings with them.
What time of day do the students tend to use the spots the most?
So in EduSpots, we have, you know, community-based sports and school-based sports. Sakasaka particularly is a school-based sport. So it opens from 6, and then we sort of like close around 5:30, 6 o'clock.
Brilliant. And can you just explain a bit more about the challenges and that kind of the system that we have with those? Sure. And perhaps because the different program streams, maybe just very briefly, in terms of what those are.
Right. We in EduSpot, we value volunteers very well. So what we do is that we make conscious efforts to ensure that they develop more professionally and personally. And in so doing, we have leadership development programs such as our flagship program for this year, which is the Ignite program, which brought together volunteers across the country to be trained on how to advance change in their community. And then as part of the Ignite program, we have 5 strands, which are all education related. So with these education strands, we give volunteers training on how to lead activities relating to these strands. Say for we have 5, we have as a 5 exactly 4 education strands, and then 5 sorry, I'm sort of like getting my maths mixed up. 4 education strands, and then 1 volunteer related strand, which is the ops strand.
So it's 5 together, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so we've got, so it's Edulit. Can you tell us a little bit about what Edulit is?
With Edulit, we seek to develop the critical thinking abilities in GHS students particularly. So we have activities that we send out monthly to volunteers to administer to these kids. So it could be an activity on how to sort of like give directions to your library, right? And then these kids are supposed to come with, innovative ideas to how to give directions to people coming to the library. So this was a challenge we undertook some few months back.
And then so just in terms of the challenges, what do we mean by an EduSpots challenge? What does that look like in a spot?
So the challenges, we are like, how I want to have another word to represent a challenge. Would be like
competition.
An education initiative, exactly a competition in a way, right? And then these challenges are sent across all sports. These sports would need to send in submissions. So once the submissions comes, we judge to know the sports that did the challenge very well. And then this is also to promote healthy competition between and among sports.
Brilliant. And just what are the other programs that we have running? So briefly, so you got Edulit. Cynthia will probably talk a bit about EduKids as well.
Yes.
And then what are the other 2?
So for the other, these are strands, and then the program, the Ignite program. So the other strands include Sport Ops, we have Educate, we have Ignite Girls, we have EcoSTEM, and then we have Edulit, as you mentioned.
Great, and they're often how the challenges will like run through those, won't they, as well? Often within the spots. And
then these challenges, they go out on a monthly basis. So each and every month there's a new challenge coming in.
Yeah, and they're really good at like I think encouraging that kind of competition, aren't they, between kind of spots and things as well, which is great, and obviously kind of nurturing that community kind of spirit as well, which is fabulous. Why do communities in Ghana actually need spots then, do you think?
Sure. So when you look, in the education system in Ghana, the rural communities which EduSpots particularly targets tend to have less of these resources. So when it comes to resource division, see the urban areas and the rural areas, usually the rural areas get less of these resources. And then most of the times they do not get these resources, all because of their geographical location in a way. So EduSpots targets rural communities which lack these resources, empower them via their own strengths. We based on the strength of the volunteers, the strength of the community members, the strength of the stakeholders within the community, to ensure that our projects and programs are, running in a sustainable way.
Yeah, fab. And I think, like, just to finish off then for your section, how would you summarize in a sentence or 2 what a spot is?
A spot is an innovative learning hub, I would say, right?
Yeah, I like that. Short and sweet, an innovative learning hub. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, Fad. It's really, really interesting to kind of hear about you and your experiences as programs manager. So thank you so much for sharing with us. I'm going to swiftly move over to Cynthia. You're in the hot seat. Hey, Cynthia.
Hi, Vicky. Hi, everyone.
I hope you're okay this evening. It's great that you could join us and to really kind of share your experience of EduSpots and what you do as well. So you are Educate's and online course coordinator based in Ghana. And I love this picture. It's very glamorous. Love it. So quick fire questions.
Thank you.
Cynthia, are you ready?
Sure. Fire away.
What is your favorite color?
My favorite color, there are actually two colors,
Oh, two.
green
Okay.
and white.
Green and white. I feel like there's a flag with
Yes,
green and
and
white.
white.
Why?
Yeah. Well, green because it gives me the whole earthy feeling, being in my natural environment. And
Like
wine
it.
because it reminds me of blood, and that's like life. So
Uh-huh.
those are the reasons why I like those colors.
Oh, I like that. I like thinking of the connotations behind them. That's cool. I like it. Do you have a most hated food?
No, I don't. But
You
I would
don't.
say that I'm attracted to food. Like I need to have an orgasm when I want to eat. The food
It's got to
must
look
attract
nice.
me. So foods that are not really attractive are not foods I'm likely to go for.
Okay. So you're a very aesthetic person. You like it to look good.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. Where did your EduSpots journey begin?
Oh, it began from a volunteer role.
Love that.
Yes,
And you're going to be
yes.
talking to us a bit about volunteerism within EduSpots, so
Yes,
that's cool. That's good. And what
yes.
did you do as a volunteer?
Okay, so I was a volunteer in my spot, which we understand now, our innovative learning spaces or hubs. And I was running an arts and literacy and a girls club at my spot. Yes.
Awesome.
So as a change maker and wanting to create change, I joined a network that helped me expand that idea. And that's how I became a volunteer with EduSpots.
Amazing. And that's where your journey kind of began. And now you're working for EduSpots. So that's exciting. And who is your biggest inspiration?
I would say Mother Teresa.
Yeah. Oh, good choice.
Yes, I know that she's usually known for the charity bit, but
Yeah.
the part of her that inspires me is her drive. You know, the passion with which she was willing to expand her project.
Mhm.
It wasn't really about whether she had the funding or not, but it was more about the passion and the drive to carry it out. And that's one thing that really inspires me, that if I'm passionate about something, if I have the drive, I'm committed to it, I would see it to the end. And for somebody who wants to be in the development space, that's one of the greatest motivations I can have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like so important, isn't it? And I think that actually that we see that drive across so many of the EduSpots team, I think as well, who just genuinely want to make a difference and change. And we do that by working together as well as a community, very collaboratively. So that's
Definitely.
awesome. Thank you. Let's dig a little bit deeper then into EduSpots then for you. We're going to focus now on the volunteers who we've heard about a little bit from Kat and Fad actually already. So who are our volunteers is kind of the big question here. So maybe if we begin with, well, actually, where do these volunteers come from?
Okay, all right. So I would say our volunteers are our local change makers who are literally the heart of our work. Yes. And these volunteers are from the sports communities, the communities where our sports are located. Now, if you would remember, Miss Kat and then Fad mentioned that we ran a community-led module. Yes. So the people from the communities are volunteers, and they are the ones that run the 5 strands we have in EduSpots. And the beautiful thing about EduSpots is there's no caste system. You don't need to be educated or anything. Volunteer base cuts across people from different walks of life. because they all have different skill sets they bring which support our sports. So everyone is welcome to be a volunteer, but you have to be in the sports community to help create change directly with the children we work with.
Yeah, that's awesome. That brings us on, I think, as well to what do sport volunteers actually do? So this could be your own experience as well. And how are they trained? So maybe give us a bit of an idea there in terms of the training they receive, what that looks like.
Okay. So the first thing about being a volunteer with EduSports is having the passion to make change in your community. Then, as a part of the network, you benefit from training sessions which happen monthly in the various strands. So as a volunteer, maybe you may want to help out in the area of girl-child empowerment, then the Ignite Girls strand may be your choice. If you're looking at early year literacy, educates will be the best to do. Literacy for JHS, that would be EduLit. And then if you're looking at STEM education in a sustainable way, then EcoSTEM will be the strand to which you can support. Now, what we do is that these various strands, the coordinators of these various strands, are very particular about the volunteers, because yes, they are voluntary, but they still need to pass on quality. So they hold monthly training sessions for these volunteers to help them to teach, coach them on the discussions we'd be having on the various monthly challenges every month. And then the volunteers are trained, or if I should say empowered, to deliver the programs to the children such that we can have learning going on, but the children will also be equipped to put in their submissions for the challenges we run.
Yeah.
Yes. And from time to time, we do have conferences. There's usually a national one that's every year. And then there's the Ignite conference for this year because of the Ignite program. So it was a program it was a conference that started and then was run in regional academies to ensure that all volunteers, or as many volunteers as possible, were trained to create impact in the strands we have. So conferences, training sessions, the Ignite talks we run, these are all avenues to empower our volunteers, as well as the online courses.
Yeah, you got to slip that in, Cynthia. We've got to get the online courses in. Yeah, that's fabulous. And I guess, so why do you think volunteers matter then so much to EduSports?
Well, EduSports thrives on volunteer voices. The strands we see exist today because volunteers shared that those are need areas they would like to create change in their sports. So the volunteer voice is most important because they are in the sports communities and they are creating the change. So how they need help to create the change is how we help them. And that's the reason why we can't exist without the volunteers.
Yeah, I love that. That's absolutely fantastic. It really kind of brings together, I think, what we've already heard from Kat and then Fad and you as well, just how the EduSports really thrives off the volunteers and the community. The volunteers are really the boots on the ground who are, EduSports couldn't exist without those volunteers doing the amazing work they do in the spots, obviously across Ghana as well. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Cynthia, at the end of to bring it all together, or are you comfortable that you've covered who a spot volunteer is? I feel like you might.
Well, I would say okay, sure. So I would say when it comes to what they do, we have basically covered it. But I would also say that there are benefits of being a volunteer in the network. Yes, there are benefits. I mean, aside the training, there's mentorship, there's recognition, they have access to grants from us and from other sources we share in our network. And they have a chance to upskill. So there's a lot that comes into being a volunteer with EduSports. You're not just giving out, but you're benefiting too.
Yeah, and I guess then the the sort of impact socially of that as well is quite significant, isn't it, in terms of Ghana itself? So that's brilliant.
Mhm.
Okay, so just as we kind of come to the end now, for the I've gone the wrong way. Just got some reminders here. So in terms of ambassadors, then first thing is obviously check those kind of weekly emails that I send towards the end of every week. They just keep you kind of updated, really. Kind of from week to week, really. So I can give you those kind of reminders consistently. Last week I sent out an interactive reading list, which actually is reading in the wider sense. So it's some web pages, there's some videos on there as well. There's a bit of research you can do within that reading list. So I'd definitely recommend that you just have a look at that link as well that I sent out. Then we kind of need to start thinking a little bit about our fundraising as well. Because towards the end of October and then into November, it will be really good for you guys to be doing some fundraising individually, and potentially with some friends as well. And then essentially we want you to do it in that kind of time, because we have something called the Big Give, which is brilliant because it means that whatever money we get through a Big Give link is doubled in that particular week. So the date is the end of November, there, the 27th of November. So if possible, if you can do some fundraising and plan for that in terms of the lead kind of section of the project, towards that kind of end of October. And that means that essentially if you can just start to think about what it is you might do, maybe check back in the handbook, there's lots of suggestions and things in there as well, or drop me an email if you want a bit more support in terms of how to fundraise and everything as well. That would be really, really good. So just do start to think about that. I really hope that you've been able to really kind of learn and grasp a little bit more about Eduspot and kind of who we are and why we do what we do in Ghana. It's been a really wonderful time, I think, actually, just to hear from the team. Like, I've learned new things this evening about my colleagues as well, which is absolutely brilliant. And if you've got any questions, you can always contact me on the address there, ambassadors@eduspot.org. So essentially, just thank you very much. Thank you to the Eduspot team who have been in the hot seat. So they've answered questions and spoken so passionately and inspirationally about Eduspot and what we do. And thank you to all of you ambassadors as well, just for signing up and for wanting to kind of be involved in this project. We really value you as well as our kind of wider volunteer network. So please do feel part of the Eduspots family whilst you are doing the kind of project and possibly beyond, who knows. So thank you very much. It's bye-bye from me. I don't know whether everyone else wants to just do a little wave. It might be a bit cheesy if you've still got your cameras on, but
Thanks, everyone.
bye guys.